History of Writing for Mass Media is a comprehensive discourse about the monumental milestones leading to the evolution and development of writing techniques for the newspaper, magazines, radio and television over a period of time. This module will delve into the evolution of writing from the alphabet to sentence formation as well as the evolution of popular mass media. Various writing techniques for print and electronic media will be discussed in this discourse. The terminology used while writing for each medium will be introduced to the students in this module. In the later part of the module, Marshall McLuhan's historical perspectives of the mass media are discussed that will enhance the understanding about the critical role of media in shaping and persuading the mass opinion. The subject expert for today is Professor F.B. Khan. He is a renowned photographer and media expert currently teaching at AJK MCRC, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. Evolution of mass media. Before the emergence of writing culture, people relied on the oral forms of collective learning. The age of signs and signals involved the active use of 5 sense organs of human beings for survival. Syllable alphabets were developed by the Greeks and Romans about 5,000 years ago that presented sounds. Alphabets emerged in 2000 BC in Egypt, and around 700 years later, alphabet sets called hieroglyphs were established. Language needed a medium of record and therefore writing practice was established. The ancient culture of Shruti Smriti, listening and remembering, has remained pivotal to Indian Sampraday. What people listened, they remembered and passed the same information orally to others. The term mass media was introduced during the early 1920s. China invented paper-making processes in 100 BC, which were eventually traded throughout Europe many centuries later. The first widely used paper called papyrus was invented in Egypt in 600 BC. Books has been the first widely acknowledged form of mass media. The first book was published in 1400 BC and was named as the Book of the Dead. Books used to be handwritten and could not be reproduced in large numbers until printing press was introduced. The first printed advertisement was of a handbill in 1477 about a book. Printing press was invented by Johannes Gutenberg in the 14th century, which has been a revolutionary milestone in the history of mass media. Development of printing technology modernized the mass media culture by giving a fillip to newspapers, magazines and telegraphs and, of course, books. The first English language newspaper called Oxford Gazette was introduced in 1665. The first Indian newspaper called Bengali Gazette, also known as Hickey's Gazette, was published from Calcutta by James Augustus Hickey in 1780. The industrial age came in the 18th century, which saw the growth of radio and television as popular forms of infotainment. In 1877, Thomas Edison invented phonograph, a device that could record and reproduce sound. Radio was invented during early 1920s. It was used by Hitler as a tool for propaganda and mass persuasion. During 1920s, radio broadcasting began in India as well. Indian Broadcasting Company was established in 1927. In 1932, Walt Disney produced a full-color movie, Flowers and Trees. It was first produced in black and white and then it was made with color strips by Herbert Kalmus. The first film in India was Raja Harishchandra, made in 1913, and the first color picture of India was Kisan Kanya, made in 1937. Television was invented in 1927 but was introduced in India during September 1959. Television and radio services of the government in India was separated in 1976 after the acceptance of the recommendations of the Akash Bharati Bill. Computers were developed during 1950s. Ray Tomlinson created electronic mails in 1971, which eased the communication process. The first portable laptop, called Osborne 1, was developed in 1981. Various writing techniques in journalism. A. Inverted pyramid style of news writing. The inverted pyramid style of writing news stories for print media was developed in the Western world during 19th century. Inverted pyramid style of writing places the most important aspects first, followed by the less important aspects and the least important aspects of the story. The heading is called Ticket on the Meat. The most engaging elements in the news story, called lead or hook, is written in the beginning, followed by the news story body and a definite end. The attention-catching elements are placed in the intro paragraph, also known as lead or peg, so that the audience is driven towards the details of the news story. 5 W's and 1 H, what, when, where, why, who, and how are written first, followed by the quotations of the concerned persons in the body copy. The ending includes very less important or additional information. News writing technique involves writing simple, short and declarative sentences in subjects, verb, object, format and present tense. B. Bluff. Bottom line up front writing. Bluff is the style of writing used in business communication, wherein the conclusive lines of the write-up are written in the beginning. This writing technique evolved with the emails and formal letter writing during 18th century. Bluff technique is used to get to the point soon, and it aids in quick decision making. It is not the gist of the matter but the end line of the story. C. Yellow journalism and paid puffery. The term yellow journalism was coined in 1880s, and it has grown as one of the most unethical and profit-oriented practices prevalent in the field of journalism in India and the world at large. The practice of yellow journalism began as early as the 17th century. In 1883, Joseph Pulitzer established criteria to keep a check on yellow journalism practices. Yellow journalism witnessed its golden age back in 1890s when fake news triggered wars. Yellow journalism refers to the practice of exaggerating the facts and sensationalizing and scandalizing the news by tempering with the actuality or real events and adding saleable values and elements. This is done to increase the sales of the newspaper or TRPs of the news channel. Literary and idiomatic language is written to add spice to yellow news stories. Yellow news has 4 basic characteristics. A. Big issue made of small news or writing fake news. B. Misleading headlines in large font size. C. Use of eye-catching pictures and in some cases caricatures and drawings. D. Anonymous sources of news. Paid puffery refers to puffing up the facts with fictitious elements and exaggerating news stories or creating new, partially or fully false news stories altogether. Paid puffery favors the sponsor and is carried out for monetary gains and image polishing. Paid puffery is a threat to the objective and people-oriented journalism in a democracy. This practice is extensively observed in print and broadcast media during the election campaigning. D. Muckraking style of writing. Muckraking is a practice in journalism wherein a group of investigative journalists and critics report and write about the corrupt practices prevalent in the political system and the corporate world. As the name suggests, muckrakers were people who intended to rake the muck out of the society. The muckrakers have a socially or politically reformative agenda while writing. The term began in the progressive era during 19th century in the US but was popularized in other parts of the world only in the late 20th century. American President Roosevelt used the term while delivering a public speech in 1906. Muckrakers initially used to write against the social injustices and economic inequalities in the American society. The primary agenda of the muckrakers was to ensure that working rights of the oppressed classes are protected and the ruling power's activities are kept under a watchdog through their investigative and revolting style of writing. In other words, muckrakers advocated through their writing in order to give a voice to the voiceless people. Their writing style was not abusive, rather than assertive and advocative in nature. Lincoln Stephens was the pioneer of muckraking style of writing. His first muckraking article, titled Tweed Days in St. Louis, 1902, exposed the scandal of political corruption which led to in-depth legal investigation. Several prominent muckrakers are Ralph Nader, Rachel Carson, Samuel Hopkins Adams, Jacob Riis, and Upton Sinclair. E. Propagandist style of writing. Propagandist style of writing is a form of mass communication which is used to manipulate and influence public perception of a particular person, issue, or event. Propagandists play with the facts and mold them to persuade the public opinion and popular beliefs to benefit the propagandists and serve their vested interests. The writing style is very persuasive and imposing rather than objective and factual. The objectives of propagandists are to manipulate the facts and reality, influence or persuade the public opinion, and win the mass belief and result in the intended change in behavior and action from the masses. There are three types of propaganda: white propaganda, black propaganda, and grey propaganda. In white propaganda, the actual source of information are revealed to the public and the facts are not distorted and presented as they are for the benefit of the propagandist. In black propaganda, false and misleading information is presented to the masses and often the information sources are hidden or disguised. It is done to play mudslinging with the opposing party. In grey propaganda, the actual source of information cannot be identified and facts are mixed with fake information. During World War II, the Nazi Party used speeches, posters and films to convince the masses that Hitler is the best leader for Germany and Jews were responsible for the lack of jobs for the natives. Triumph of the Will, 1935 by Leni Riefenstahl, is the iconic Nazi propagandist documentary that presents the ways in which propaganda techniques were used in the form of speech by Adolf Hitler. Hitler also used radio broadcasts for propaganda in Germany. In the election campaigning of 2014 in India, Narendra Modi led Bharatiya Janata Party extensively used public speeches in the popular mass media like newspapers, radio and television broadcasts, as well as new media for executing multiple propagandist techniques. Techniques of propagandist writing. First, bandwagon technique. The phrase joining the bandwagon means doing something just because other people are doing it. This technique is used to instill a popular belief in the masses and persuading them to think and act in a certain way to benefit the propagandist. An illusion of popular faith is created by the mass media writing so that the audience feels that many people are following a particular leader or a political party and they must do so as well. Second, snob appeal technique involves instilling thinking, acting or behaving patterns of the affluent or rich classes on the common masses through the various forms of mass media writing. Advertisements with celebrities as brand ambassadors and the brand faces are examples of how snob appeal is used to persuade the masses to desire a particular product because the popular celebrities use and endorse it. Third, using loaded words are the heavy words that help in establishing positive and negative associations with the discussed issue or person or event. It also includes name calling and mudslinging. The term name-calling is a direct or indirect verbal or written attack on an individual or group using derogative adjectives and at times sarcasm. It is synonymous with stereotyping or attaching labels as a form of propaganda. Name-calling evokes fear and hatred in the masses towards a person or community. Fourth, transfer technique uses symbols to establish irrational and negative connection between two things or two people. This is done to promote or demote a product or service. Fifth, writing unreliable testimonials. The authentic quotes from reliable people who are generally famous among the target groups are used to recommend a product, service or an individual's electoral candidature. Sixth, glittering generalities is a technique of propaganda used to embellish ideas and beliefs in the masses by using virtue words. It is used to create a positive image of an individual into the minds of the people and expect a positive response from them. Eighth, repetition technique is used for instilling ideas and faiths into the minds of people by sending the communication messages repeatedly. Repetition is used for broadcast advertisements that gain high recall value among the target audiences. Ninth, using emotional words is a technique meant to evoke certain emotions and feelings about a particular person, product or service. 10th, plain folks technique uses the common man card to promote the products or the electoral candidature of a person. The cultural and social value systems of a common man are linked with the advertorial to benefit the sponsoring agency. 11th, card stacking technique is commonly used for writing good advertisements. The ad copywriter focuses on the best features of the product or service, disguises its policies and tells half-baked truth by partially lying about the product or service. In other words, cart stacking is done to make the product or service appear more beneficial. Next, F. Storytelling style of writing. Storytelling was an ancient form of oral communication in the Indian culture. People with higher degree of wisdom used to tell stories that listeners memorized and passed on to the future generations. These stories were based on mythological or religious faiths as well as travel experiences of people. Advancement of printing techniques and broadcasting technology added elements to the storytelling. Narratives, characters, dialogues and props. A story has three parts: intro, middle and end. Storytelling can be executed using pictures, audiovisuals and printed words. Stories started getting recorded on paper and mass media like magazines, radio channels and television channels. Storyboard is a prominent part of storytelling invented by Walt Disney in 1974. Storyboard is the organized form of illustrations drawn in the tabular boxes that describe one shot in each box using text, graphics, caricatures, etc. It gives information of the shot and how the scenes will be formed in a predetermined sequence. G. Advertisement writing is done in congruence with two fundamental models: AIDA, IDA, attention, interest, desire and action, and DAGMAR, DAGMAR, defined advertising goals for measured advertising results. Models. IDA model of advertising follows the following trajectory to persuade buying actions by consumers of advertised product or service. Attention. A. The print media ad has to catch the attention of viewers. Composition of the advertisement is the important factor. That is, how is the ad composed by the copywriter? The advertisement writers have to make use of the aesthetic elements of art and principles of design in order to decide where and how to place the picture, text and empty space in the advertisement. Interest. I. After catching the attention of viewer, the advertisement has to sustain the attention by creating interest in the advertised product or service. Here, the advertiser has to strategize to reach the right group of consumers by using segment target positioning approach. Selection of the appropriate media vehicles is important to decide who, when and how to reach. In this stage, the feature of the product have to turn into benefits to intrigue the consumer. Desire. D. The advertised benefits of the product as well as the glorification of the product using human emotions should create a desire in the consumer to buy the product. Advertising is all about creating desires. Action. A. All three steps, attention, interest and desire, must instigate or motivate the consumer to take the purchase action. However, this stage is dependent on the purchasing capacity, willingness to buy and utility of the product for the consumer. The second very essential model in advertising is DAGMAR model, introduced in 1961 by Russell Coley. The stages of DAGMAR are as below. First, awareness. The advertisement has to make the consumer aware of its presence in the market through the frequency of sight. Second, comprehension. The advertiser has to write about the benefits of the product or service to inform the consumer about what will the product do for them. Third, conviction. The print advertisement has to convince the consumer that it is the product or service is of utmost value, relevance and appeal to the customer. Fourth, action. The awareness about the product or service, comprehension of its features and benefits, as well as the conviction-led desire should cumulatively motivate the consumer to buy the product or service. H. Documentary style of writing. The word documentary was coined by a Scottish filmmaker, John Grierson, 1926. Grierson is called the father of documentary films. He defined documentary as the creative treatment of actuality. In other words, documentary is a slice of real life. It presents a documentation of facts and reality with little or no fiction. Most of the documentaries are purely non-fictional in nature. However, some documentaries stage reality to depict things of the past, how they must have occurred in real. In 1895, the two Frenchmen, Lumiere brothers, Louis and Augustus Lumiere, started making 1-minute-long, unedited single-shot films to record single actions like train coming onto the station or factory workers leaving for work. These short films were screened in Paris. The camera used by Lumiere brothers could hold 50 feet of film stock. In 1920, Dziga Vertov, the Russian filmmaker, started documenting the educational newsreels called the Kinoi, meaning cinematic truth. In 1922, it saw the emergence of first feature-length documentary film called Nanook of the North by an American filmmaker named Robert J. Fleharthi. It was a heavily staged film that depicted the life of Eskimos living in extreme cold conditions. During 1930s to 1940s, documentary films became tools for propaganda. During 1950s to 1960s, direct cinema was a movement that began in the US to present the social and political issues of the country in direct and unmediated way to give an impression that the events have been recorded just as they occurred in the past. A similar movement called Cinema Verite, meaning cinematic truth, was taking place in France. In Cinema Verite, the viewer is given a direct view of what is happening in front of the camera. It covers the everyday life instances of ordinary citizens of France. This style of filmmaking uses handheld camera, natural lighting and location filming and direct sound. Both direct cinema and Cinema Verite use natural sounds and lengthy shots taken using handheld cameras. 1970s to 1980 onwards, documentaries are focused on issues like women's rights, human rights, and were made to mobilize collective revolts by marginalized communities living in the Third World. Marshall McLuhan's perspectives on history of mass media. Critical media theorist Marshall McLuhan believed that three inventions in the field of mass media writing have transformed the world of communications: phonetic alphabets, the printing press, the telegraph. He viewed these technological developments as the important milestones in the growth of mass media in the world. McLuhan segmented the history of mass media into four phases of time: the tribal era, the literate era, the print era, and the electronic era. First, the tribal era is also known as the acoustic era. It was characterized by the prominence given to the sense of hearing. In other words, during tribal era, hearing meant believing, and what was heard was remembered by the people. Also, the sense of touch and taste was strongly developed in the people. People used to collectively listen to the spoken wisdom, memorize it, and pass it on to the future generations. This enabled the development of a feeling of oneness in the human community. Second, the literate era is also known as the visual era. During literate era, eyes were the dominant sense organ and seeing meant believing for the people. Sounds were turned into visible objects which could be seen and read over and over again. Tribes did not need to get collected at one place to get information. People learned how to read and became independent thinkers. Third, the print era began with the invention of the printing press that facilitated the ability to reproduce the same text, making way for books and libraries to record knowledge. Fourth, the electronic era is the age of telecommunications in the world. It was characterized by the invention of telegraph, telephone, radio, and television. Eventually, video games and cell phones made their way into telecommunication systems, and communication processes became easy and convenient. Prediction of a global village. The critical media theorist McLuhan used the metaphor called global village for predicting the influence of the internet on its users all over the world. He predicted that the new media will supersede the electronic media and the World Wide Web would connect the people all over the world virtually. It will be an unprecedented development, ensuring that the digital technologies would shrink the globe into one big connected village that is united by the web. Medium is the message. McLuhan wrote a book called Understanding Media, 1964, in which he emphasized the role of medium in shaping up the content. McLuhan believed that the characteristics of a medium can influence and decide the content so that the medium becomes equally significant as the message. He strongly believed that media influences the society in many ways. He concluded that whenever a new medium is introduced, it brings with itself a force that causes social transformations. He said that if we want to understand the message, we need to study the medium. It is the content that distracts us from the actual effects of the medium on us. Any medium can have two kinds of effects on us: evident effects and unanticipated effects. He uses the term narcosis to suggest a numbness in our senses caused by the overuse of a medium. Therefore, McLuhan suggested that man shapes up the technological tools first that reshapes the lifestyle of a man in positive and negative ways. Conclusion. This module has covered the various developments in the history of writing for mass media. The history of different genres of media writing like news, muckraking, yellow journalism, and paid puffery, storytelling, documentary, and advertising are covered and brief. The various types of propagandist media writing are also discussed in the module. The later part of the module has delved into the history of mass media from the perspective of the critical media theorist Marshall McLuhan. He introduced the concept of global village and believed that medium is the message. Hope this module helps in aiding the understanding of students about the historic dynamics of mass media writing. Till the next time, it's a goodbye.